Parker's Creek is a small treasure located in the heart of Calvert County, Maryland. The creek flows through an unspoiled salt marsh and enters the Chesapeake Bay through an opening in the fossil-rich Calvert Cliffs. Located in a region pressed by the suburban sprawl from Washington, Annapolis, and Baltimore, the forests, farms, and small communities in the creek's watershed provide a rural oasis in this rapidly developing region. Many groups and individuals have taken it upon themselves to preserve this area as a refuge for nature and for the enjoyment of all.
Well, Parker's Creek is unique. There are no wetlands that I'm aware in the state that have the unique topography that Parker's Creek has. You go right from a wooded upland to salt marsh with absolutely nothing in between.
The neatest thing about Parker Creek is the fact that it is intact. There used to be a number of these little estuarine systems all up and down the western shore of the Chesapeake, and if you go look at them now, they have towns at the head of them. They've been ditched out, they've got marinas in the back of them, and they've been completely altered from their natural state, whereas Parker Creek, through a sort of series of accidents, has been left in a very natural condition. And what you look for when you go up Parker Creek is the fact that it's a complete functioning ecosystem. From the headwaters to the bottom, it's in extremely good shape, unusually good shape.
The water comes from so many miles away from where it empties into the Chesapeake Bay. So everything that goes into that Parker's Creek, for the most part, will end up in the Chesapeake Bay. And if we're able to continue with the current plan, and you protect Parker's Creek, it exemplifies what we ought to be doing with every creek that we possibly can, and that's to cleanse that water before it gets into the Chesapeake Bay.
One of the few unspoiled resources in this region, the Parker's Creek watershed has retained its rural flavor.
The property's been in the Freeland family for over 4 generations. My great-grandfather bought the farm in the early 1930s, and we've lived here ever since. Back in the 30s on up to the mid-80s, this was a primary tobacco farm.
Wilson Freeland and his father Victor protected their land by placing it in an agricultural preservation district, as has the family of Margaret Young, who joins Elvin Howard in reminiscing about farming in years past.
It's always been such an important part of our lives to plant things and see them grow, and of course we lived from the farm for so many years.
Something that kids do not do at all now. We would sit out and look at the stars at night and look at the clouds and see how they moved past each other, and just did things like that because there was no television at that time and to look at, so there was nothing special in the house, so we'd look at we'd do things outside.
Maybe, just maybe that you know, the effort that's been made here will be symbolic and serve as a beacon to other areas of the country, that, hey, let's slow down a little bit and let's drink up a little of the past.
Parker's Creek and its watershed give us a glimpse of history, both recent and ancient.
If you think of the archaeological record as a book, here in Parker Creek watershed, we have a book from which very few pages are missing. In all likelihood, people have inhabited this area for over 12,000 years, and their record is still in the landscape. We know from speaking to local farmers that there are plenty of evidences of prehistoric occupations. Those survive in the form of stone tools mostly. And the historic occupations, meaning since Europeans landed on these shores, are still evident in the form of hand-dug field boundaries. This, and perhaps, although we don't know where yet, the 17th century town of Warrington exists somewhere in the watershed.
For thousands of years, Parker's Creek has reached the bay through an opening carved in the cliffs, but the layers of sediment and fossils in the cliffs tell an even older story, taking us back 12 million years, when this entire region was the floor of the sea.
The great thing about a cliff, about any fossil deposit that's a sedimentary deposit that's stratified the way that Calvert Cliffs is what you're looking at is a timeline. You're looking at a period of geological history of so long a period of time that we can talk about it, we can assign numbers to it, but it's a longer time than we can really comprehend compared to our own instantaneous lifetimes.
The Parker Creek area is very, very beautiful. Like I said, when we went on a canoeing trip, we saw how pretty it was by water. Whereas normally we just walk the area. But when we went down the Parker Creek itself, and then it went out into the Chesapeake Bay, it was just really beautiful. It was as if you were an explorer.
Moving further back in the creek, the changes that occur along the channel are mostly caused by the differences in the salinity of the creek. As you're moving back, the creek is getting fresher as the tidal influence becomes less and less. And as you get back, the creek meander character changes, and the creek widens out. It becomes shallower. You find plants, different plants, growing in the water itself, and along the edge, the plants will change too, until you gradually, one species will drop out as the salinity becomes lower and lower and it becomes more and more fresh water, and another species will come in, and gradually as you go back, the entire makeup of the plant cover will completely change. The incredible thing about Parker Creek is that it's a large, intact watershed with a very wide diversity of habitats contained within it that function together as a system, and life goes on in this little system much as it has for thousands of years. Things change, the rains change from one year to another, and the salinity in the creek changes. It changes every day with the coming and going of the tide. It changes from month to month with rainfall. It changes from year to year with the salinity in the bay from which it takes tidal input. And as a result, the vegetation in the marsh moves around. Patches of one plant will appear and grow and thrive and then die off to be replaced by something else later on. The entire mosaic is constantly changing. But for the long term, the whole system is working together, cycling through itself and continuing on as a functioning natural system.
Our children now, when they come out and they walk the land, they've even been on canoe trips in Parker Creek. They say, oh, wow, they said, you don't need to read National Geographic. This is National Geographic. They get very excited when they see what's back there.
It's always a similar response. This is better than watching it on TV.
Yeah.
This is real. This is fantastic. It's not like going to an amusement park necessarily, but in a way we have a little surprise to lay on people when they come out every once in a while.
The preservation of Parker's Creek and its watershed has caught the interest of concerned individuals, state and local government, and nonprofit groups. The most active group is the American Chestnut Land Trust. Members of the Land Trust contribute whatever they can, putting their own land in preservation, donating money for the cause, or donating their time, helping in the office or maintaining the nature trails. Through these efforts, the American Chestnut Land Trust has protected more than 600 acres within the creek's watershed.
Each one of us in our daily lives and what we do has some influence in one way or the other on the Chesapeake Bay and its tributaries. And you and I know the Chesapeake Bay is the very, very heart of Maryland. If we are unable to clean the Chesapeake Bay up, and that bay truly were to die, and all of aquatic life dwindle, the heart of Maryland quits beating. That's the heart of Maryland. It would actually stop beating. Each individual has a role to play.
Several landowners have placed their lands in preservation districts and have learned that good preservation practices can increase a farm's profitability.
The good farmers will have no fear at all of watershed preservation. I think that the farmers that aren't knowledgeable enough about sediment control and don't do soil testing, and they're probably not making a lot off their farms anyway because their inputs are so high. I think they probably have some concerns, but the good farmers, the stewards, the preservation falls right in line with what they're doing.
The preservation of Parker's Creek and the Chesapeake Bay benefits everyone.
We aren't going to clean the Chesapeake Bay up just to beautify it. We're cleaning it up because it has an economic potential out there. It's almost $1 billion industry now. And with appropriate strategy, we can get a real big bang for our bucks.
The Chesapeake Bay once fed quite a large part of the East Coast. With the fish disappearing off the East Coast of the United States and the bay diminishing sharply, we can't help but to wonder what our future is, not just for us, but for our children, our grandchildren. Saving part of the estuary and places where the fish breed is something that is a duty to all of us.
We haven't been good stewards. We haven't been good stewards at all. That's why we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on the Chesapeake Bay today. Because somebody saw a quick way to make $1 by dumping the stuff into the river, into the bay, into the streams or whatever. And I hope we've learned our lesson. I hope with the economic turndown that we'll all remember that we've got to put our shoulder to the wheel. This is no time to cop out. This is no time to cut and run. This is a time we really have to use all the talent and energy and ambition we have to make sure the conscience of all of us remains sensitive to what really is important. And this is a great natural resource the good Lord was kind enough to bestow upon us. Because in the final analysis, that's really what counts. It's what we leave behind for our children and future generations.